They say a child cannot choose their father, but a mother can certainly make that choice. In this chilling case, that choice would prove to be fateful. Jesse McFadden, a convicted rapist with a harrowing history of sexual crimes, was granted the opportunity to become a father figure to 3 teenagers, a decision that would have devastating consequences. On the day he was slated to appear in court, Jesse McFadden vanished. What followed was a harrowing discovery. 7 bodies were found at his home, each shot in the head, with 2 of the victims having been sexually assaulted. The pressing question remained, how could such a horror unfold? As the investigation deepens, you will form your own conclusions by the end of this narrative. Prepare yourself, for this is a case that will linger in your mind. Our story begins approximately a year ago in Henrietta, Oklahoma, with Holly McFadden at its center. Holly McFadden was a striking 35-year-old mother of 3 teenagers. Among her children were 2 daughters, the 13-year-old Tiffany Guess and the 17-year-old Riley Allen. She also had a son, 15-year-old Michael Mayo. Despite their different biological fathers, the children all regarded Tiffany's father, Joe, as their dad. Joe was not merely a figure in their lives, he was their unwavering rock, a constant source of support. Holly and Joe had been married for 13 years before their divorce, yet his presence remained strong in Riley's life since she was just a year old. Even after their marriage ended, Joe's love for the children never faltered. He cared for them as if they were his own flesh and blood. He even had aspirations to adopt Michael and Riley. But everything shifted on May 26, 2022. Holly remarried, this time to a man named Jesse McFadden, and it was here that their lives took a tragic turn. To the outside world, their life appeared to be a fairy tale, a joyful marriage and a blended family seemingly thriving. Yet no one anticipated the horrifying truths about Jesse that would emerge just a year after their vows. At this point, it remains unclear whether Holly was aware of Jesse's dark past prior to their marriage. However, what is known is that her mother stumbled upon Jesse's troubling history several months before the tragedy unfolded. We will delve deeper into those details shortly. Jesse McFadden was born in Kansas and dropped out of school after the 9th grade. His first brush with the law came while he was living in McAllister, where he faced charges for possessing alcohol as a minor. In 2002, he confessed to stealing over $80,000 from his grandfather, pleading guilty to a felony charge of grand larceny. The following year, he was apprehended twice for driving with a suspended license, but his most alarming crime occurred in 2003. Jesse was arrested for the brutal attack on a 17-year-old girl using a knife with sexual intentions. Convicted of this heinous act, he was sentenced to 20 years in prison. His time behind bars would be marred by further infractions. In 2013, he was caught with a cell phone. A woman reported that he had been sending her sexual messages for 3 months. In 2016, he found himself in trouble again when prison officers confiscated another cell phone, uncovering explicit conversations involving a 16-year-old girl named Caitlin. Caitlin's grandfather had alerted prison officials about their inappropriate interactions, as detailed in an affidavit from a Department of Corrections investigator. Jesse was accused of sending graphic content to Caitlin and engaging in manipulative behavior, despite being required to serve 85% of his sentence. Jesse's time in prison was paradoxically marked by glowing evaluations for work and educational efforts, which made him eligible for early release. Little did anyone know, this would set the stage for a nightmare waiting to unfold. Jesse McFadden's troubled past included a troubling incident involving a contraband cell phone, which momentarily stripped him of his privileges before his release in October 2020. The perplexing question loomed large. How did someone with such a checkered history manage to secure early release? Even more baffling was the fact that he had been caught engaging in the very behaviors that originally landed him behind bars. It was unfathomable why he wasn't detained until his trial, especially since his possession of that cell phone should have barred any chance of early release. After his release, Jesse was obligated to check in with the sheriff's office every 90 days, a requirement he blatantly ignored. Typically, individuals like him are prohibited from being near places frequented by children, such as schools and sports events, yet he disregarded these rules entirely. Recall the earlier mention of Jesse being accused of sexting with Caitlin. The trial for that incident was postponed for several years, an unforeseen delay that allowed Jesse to marry and assume the role of stepfather to Holly's 3 children. It wasn't until May 1, 2023 that the long-awaited trial would finally commence. The delay in Jesse McFadden's trial created a window for him to marry Holly McFadden and assume a stepfather role to her 3 children. However, it was not until May 1st, 2023, that the trial would finally commence. Jesse intended to defend himself by claiming he was only communicating with a 20-year-old friend of the 16-year-old girl, not the girl herself. Joe, Holly's ex-husband, and Holly had established a strict rule. Anyone around their children had to pass a background check. Holly assured Joe that Jesse's background check was clear prior to the trial on May 1st. Yet, it remains a mystery whether Holly overlooked Jesse's troubling behavior or simply chose to ignore it. What truly transpired is now lost to speculation. Meanwhile, while all awaited the trial, a series of deadly events were about to unfold. During the last weekend of April 2023, Ivy Webster and Brittany Brewer, along with several other girls who opted out, were invited to spend time at Tiffany's house, where Jesse McFadden was also staying. The weekend was meant for typical teenage fun. On Saturday, around noon, Jesse picked up Brittany with plans for a shopping trip to the mall. Their itinerary also included a visit to Main Event, a popular family entertainment center in Tulsa. Ivy kept her mother, Ashley Webster, updated through Snapchat throughout the evening. However, the next morning, something felt amiss. Ivy and Brittany's parents began receiving texts from their daughters, stating they were heading to McFadden's family property in McAllister. By Monday morning, the situation escalated into a full-blown crisis. None of the children, Brittany, Ivy, Tiffany, Michael, or Riley, were seen getting on the school bus that drove past their homes. Alarmed and anxious, the parents reported their children as missing to the police. At the same time, Jesse McFadden was scheduled to appear in court for his trial that Monday, but he failed to show up. Officers waited outside his property for a warrant, and when they finally obtained it, they were unprepared for the horrifying discovery that awaited them. 7 bodies were uncovered scattered across Jesse McFadden's property. The initial shock of discovering Jesse himself among the deceased was just the beginning, as authorities began to piece together the identities of the victims. It quickly became apparent that the other 6 victims were equally tragic. Jesse's wife, Holly, her 3 children, Tiffany, Michael, and Riley, alongside Ivy and Brittany, 2 close friends of the family. Jesse McFadden was due to face the court that fateful Monday, but he never arrived. Outside his property, officers anxiously awaited a warrant. When it finally came, they were unprepared for the horrific truth that lay within. 7 bodies were unearthed across Jesse McFadden's sprawling property. The initial shock of discovering Jesse among the deceased was merely the beginning, as authorities scrambled to identify the tragic victims. It soon became evident that the loss was profound. Jesse's wife, Holly, her 3 children, Tiffany, Michael, and Riley, alongside Ivy and Brittany, 2 cherished friends of the family. In a chilling revelation of cold-blooded violence, all 7 victims had been brutally shot in the head with a 9mm pistol. Among them, Holly McFadden suffered 3 gunshot wounds, while Jesse McFadden appeared to have turned the gun on himself in a final act of desperation. The bodies lay scattered across 2 separate locations on the expansive property. Ivy, Brittany, and Riley were discovered approximately a quarter-mile from the house, while the remaining 4 victims were found concealed within a dense wooded area. The disturbing separation of these bodies hinted at a more sinister narrative. It became evident that the victims might have been killed at different locations and subsequently moved, or perhaps they had been trying to escape their assailant. Investigators quickly uncovered the tragic truth. Jesse had unleashed his fury on his wife, her children, and their friends, before ultimately taking his own life. The motive behind these horrific killings remained shrouded in mystery, yet unsettling clues began to surface. Jesse was scheduled to start his trial on the very morning the bodies were discovered, a detail that sent shivers down the spine of those investigating the case. It is profoundly chilling to consider that he might have committed these heinous acts to ensure his dark secrets remained buried, preventing his family from uncovering the horrifying details of his actions just hours before the trial commenced. Text messages began to reveal the disturbed mind of Jesse McFadden. Caitlin, a witness to these events, recounted receiving unsettling messages from him the evening prior to the trial. As she prepared for her crucial day in court in Oklahoma, a Facebook message request from Jesse caught her attention. Around 8 p.m., Jesse's messages conveyed a disturbing tone, as he seemed to blame Caitlin for not dropping the charges against him. In his rambling frustration, he expressed how his life was unraveling because of her actions. He proclaimed, "I did exactly what I promised I would do when I got out. I got a marketing job, made great money, and was advancing. He continued, I've been here 2 years now, built a great life like I promised with you. This is all on you for continuing this. In another message, he lamented, Now it's all gone. I told you I wouldn't. These messages revealed a man on the brink, desperate to avoid a return to prison and enraged that his secrets were on the verge of exposure. At first, Caitlin assumed McFadden's blame was directed at her for some personal failure, perhaps a lost job. The tone of his messages hinted he no longer cared about the conditions of his bail, as reaching out to her was a clear violation of the rules. Not wanting to become embroiled in his turmoil, Caitlin chose to ignore the messages. Instead, she took the precaution of capturing a screenshot and sending it to Edwards, the district attorney of Muskogee County. The following morning, Caitlin received an unsettling call from the prosecutor. The trial had been delayed once again. As a precaution, Caitlin captured a screenshot and sent it to Edwards, the district attorney of Muskogee County. The following morning, she received a disquieting call from the prosecutor. The trial had been postponed yet again. The delay stemmed from McFadden's lawyer seeking additional time due to complications with McFadden's phone. Just 30 minutes later, urgency surged as Caitlin received another call from the prosecutor, informing her of a missing persons report involving McFadden, Brittany Brewer, and Ivy Webster. Recognizing the severity of the unfolding crisis, Caitlin hastily packed a bag and secured an Airbnb just 45 minutes away, fearing that Jesse might come for her. Crystal Smith, one of Jesse's previous victims, also bravely shared her harrowing story and the heartbreak of discovering the tragic events that had transpired. Crystal had desperately implored the district attorney to keep Jesse McFadden behind bars, fearing that his release would only lead to further harm. Reflecting on her own past, she recalled the last time she heard about him when she was just 17. He had been high on meth and filled with remorse for his past actions. Yet, despite her efforts to move on, the news of the recent tragedy forced her to relive the gut-wrenching memories she had tried to bury. In a haunting recounting, Crystal detailed the terror she endured when Jesse attacked her at the age of 16. It had been a seemingly ordinary night at a party in McAllister, but when she returned home, Jesse appeared uninvited, claiming his wife had thrown him out and he needed a place to stay. Despite her attempts to reject his presence, Jesse forced his way inside, silencing her screams by gagging her with a sock. He bound her to her bed, subjecting her to unimaginable horrors. Following the discovery of the bodies, Caitlin Babb found herself overwhelmed by a tempest of emotions. Guilt, anger, frustration, and profound grief crashed over her like a relentless tide. "I feel horrible," she confessed, her voice heavy with despair. "It makes you feel like you're not even human, you know?" Caitlin's case was set to go to trial on Monday, a date she had long prepared for. She had been ready for 6 years, but when the gruesome news broke, McFadden was a no-show. The devastation was palpable, especially knowing that this tragedy could have been prevented. "It never should have happened," she lamented. As the reality of Jesse's past came to light, the parents of Ivy and Brittany were left in shock. They had been completely unaware of his criminal history, believing the weekend sleepover to be a normal occurrence. Nathan Brewer, Brittany's father, described Jesse as a nice guy, unaware of the monster lurking beneath the surface. Ivy's mother, Ashley Webster, revealed that their families had been friends since late 2020, and she too had no knowledge of Jesse's dark background. Ashley painted a picture of Tiffany and Ivy as inseparable best friends, emphasizing that Tiffany felt like another child to her family. Jeanette Mayo, Holly's mother, shared her own disbelief, admitting that her daughter had been completely fooled by Jesse McFadden's charm. She reiterated how Tiffany and Ivy were like sisters and echoed her shock at Holly's naivety in trusting Jesse. Jeanette observed that Jesse maintained a tight grip on Holly's life, controlling where she could go, who she could see, and even tracking the children's cell phones when they were out. This controlling behavior only added to the confusion felt by Jeanette and her husband. Months before the murders, they stumbled upon Jesse's criminal record when Jeanette's husband was researching a coworker's past. Faced with this disturbing revelation, Jeanette and her husband confronted Holly about what they had discovered. Eventually, Holly approached Jesse for an explanation. In a chilling response, Jesse, with his twisted mind, hired someone to convince Holly that his prior legal troubles were merely a misunderstanding. He claimed that he had never harmed anyone back in 2003. Despite this, Holly's insistence that Jesse had passed a background check raised significant alarms among her family. Jeanette found herself as the most vocal family member about Jesse's status as a registered sex offender. She would express her concerns, urging caution, but each time they attempted to address the issue, Holly was met with punishment, silencing her and leaving her walking on eggshells. Holly felt trapped. She struggled to maintain communication with her children, forced to balance her desire to keep an eye on her grandchildren while navigating the dangerous waters of her relationship with Jesse. The fear of losing contact with her family weighed heavily on her, and she had to accept Jesse's presence in her life if she wanted to stay connected with her daughter and grandchildren. Days after the tragic murders, the families of the victims, accompanied by a sheriff's investigator, entered the house that had become a haunting ground. What awaited them inside was nothing short of horrifying. In the dimly lit rooms, multiple beds were fitted with restraints, and chains were ominously locked into place. The kitchen revealed a chilling sight as a chain and lock hung from the island. The house was a grotesque display of bondage toys and restraining devices, each piece telling a dark story. Scattered throughout were bottles of lubrication and books steeped in witchcraft, mingling with drug paraphernalia, including what appeared to be candy laced with narcotics. Investigators meticulously gathered a trove of evidence from the scene, seizing computers and cell phones that could unravel the mystery. Among the disturbing evidence were dirty bed sheets and other unsettling materials. One family stumbled upon their daughter's cell phone, alongside several other devices, multiple computers and 2 laptops, each a potential key to the truth. They uncovered a bloody wet wipe, 5 additional phones, and even more chilling items hidden within the closet, including sex and bondage devices. In a 2-week search, officials collected at least 2 hard drives, alongside 9 cell phones, palm and fingerprints from Jesse McFadden's truck, and various purchase receipts that could link him to the horrors within. The investigation also extended to a storage unit registered under Holly McFadden's name. However, when the families called the police to report their findings, they were shockingly told to leave the property, leaving them in disbelief. Then, a notebook surfaced, filled with names, including those of the 6 victims Jesse had brutally murdered. The revelations from the house raised a haunting question. Did Holly know about Jesse's sinister actions? The state of the house was appalling, revealing a long history of torment and depravity. It was shocking how all this evidence had been overlooked, likely due to gross negligence from law enforcement, who permitted the families to enter the crime scene before it was fully cleared. It was unfathomable, and the chilling details within the notebook suggested that Jesse might have orchestrated this horror before, with everything meticulously planned. In an emotional interview, Ivy Webster's parents shared their harrowing belief that Jesse had impersonated their daughter through a text message sent on Sunday, after he had already ended her life. Ivy's mother, Ashley, recalled how she had been texting with Ivy late Saturday night. Yet, the message that arrived the following morning felt unsettling. It stated that Ivy would be going to McAllister and would return later. Now, they suspected Jesse had sent that message, as Ivy was likely already gone when it was dispatched. Ashley described Ivy as a wonderful kid, someone who adored animals, people, and playing softball. Known for her big heart and caring nature, Ivy was not just a daughter. She was Ashley's best friend. Their conversations were laced with affection, always ending with, "I love you." So when Ivy texted about swimming in McAllister, the specific wording struck Ashley as odd, yet she dismissed it, assuming Ivy was simply in a hurry. Ivy's parents also noted that they found Jesse's demeanor peculiar, but since Ivy's friends frequently visited his home, they believed it was safe for her to do the same. Tiffany, another daughter, often stayed over on weekends, and nothing seemed amiss during those visits. Jesse had skillfully concealed his true nature, convincing everyone that he was a devoted husband and a caring father figure. As Ivy's parents recalled the events leading up to her disappearance, they initially believed she was simply in a rush. They noted that while Jesse McFadden had always struck them as somewhat peculiar, Ivy often spent time at his home with friends, leading them to feel it was a safe environment. It was not uncommon for Tiffany, Ivy's close friend, to visit frequently and even stay over on weekends. During these visits, nothing ever seemed amiss. Jesse had masterfully masked his true nature, presenting himself as a devoted husband and a caring father figure, successfully deceiving those around him. Yet, beneath this facade, a chilling truth lay hidden, one that would soon unravel in a shocking series of events, leaving a community in disbelief. With a voice trembling under the weight of grief, Nathan, Brittany's father, recounted the vibrant spirit of his daughter. She had dreams of becoming a teacher or a veterinarian, aspirations that seemed within reach. Brittany's excitement was palpable, especially when she was chosen as Miss July in a local pageant, a stepping stone to the Miss National pageant in Tulsa. The joy surrounding her accomplishments was now overshadowed by heartbreak, as Nathan lamented the future that would never be. Jeanette, who had endured the unimaginable loss of 4 family members, shared her anguish while speaking about her beloved daughter and grandchildren. In her poignant reflection, Jeanette described Holly as a devoted mother, fiercely protective and endlessly loving. But for Jesse McFadden, justice was paramount. He did not deserve an easy escape from the consequences of his actions. The gravity of his crimes warranted a reckoning far beyond a swift end. As the investigation unfolded, even those who had crossed paths with McFadden in prison began to reveal the darkness that lay beneath his facade. James Fleming, a former cellmate at Joseph Harper Correctional Center in 2015, painted a disturbing portrait of McFadden's character, describing him as overtly sexual. Fleming recalled how their conversations frequently veered into unsettling territory. "He talked about sex all the time," Fleming remarked. It was a relentless theme, one that left him uneasy. He confided that had he not been mentally and physically strong, he feared McFadden might have attempted to prey on him. The revelation of McFadden's past crimes shifted everything for Fleming, forcing him to reevaluate his perception of the man he had shared a cell with. "When you find out something like that, it changes everything you think about a person," he said. "You don't receive a 20-year sentence for statutory rape if you're 18 and the girl is 17 just because her parents got upset." Fleming understood the gravity of McFadden's character. It was far worse than anyone could imagine. Locked up with a dangerous man for over 16 months, Fleming was acutely aware of the predatory behavior that defined their interactions. As he served time for burglary, he met Jesse McFadden, a man whom police would later identify as a killer of 5 children, his wife, and ultimately himself. McFadden's concerning predatory tendencies were evident. Every discussion they had inevitably led to sexual comments or innuendos. The grim reality that 2 of McFadden's victims were friends who suffered molestation before their tragic deaths has left many questioning how someone like him could slip through the cracks of the justice system, despite his checkered past and glaring red flags. Why were the signs ignored? How did the system fail so many innocent lives? Although Jesse McFadden attempted to portray himself as a reformed man by marrying Holly and playing the role of a caring father, the disturbing items discovered in their home, hand restraints, sex toys, and explicit literature, were unmistakable warning signs. It became evident that Holly may have been manipulated into accepting this troubling reality as normal. As new people enter our lives, it's crucial to remain vigilant and aware, for one can never truly judge another's character at first glance. The world is vast, filled with hidden secrets. Stay alert and informed. If you found this story compelling, remember to subscribe and explore our other true crime narratives. Take care, and we hope to see you again in our next episode. As the investigation continued, the weight of the unfolding tragedy pressed heavily on all those involved.